Some crazy things happened today while I was working on a video I'm going to be putting out in the near future in regards to how close the Wuhan Institute of Virology is and was to where they had the 2019 World Military Games and where they also housed the athletes, which they housed the athletes right down in here, and the Wuhan Games, the opening ceremony was right up in here. So as we can see right here is around where the military athletic village was built to house all the athletes, right around this area. And up in this area we see is where the Wuhan Sports Center, this is where they had the opening ceremony and a lot of the events took place. And then of course up here you have the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We're going to do a short read from the National Library of Medicine, and this is in regards to the impact of the World Military Games on the COVID-19 pandemic. And this was put up on January 19th, 2021. And then after the short read, we're going to go to the housing that the athletes that competed in the World Military Games were housed. And you're going to find that right above where all these 9,000 plus military athletes were housed was a huge chicken farm. And then we're going to touch upon that because it's amazing how not deep the rabbit hole gets, but how wide it gets also. It is clear that travel was a major factor in the rapid dissemination of COVID-19 disease. It has been proposed that the Wuhan, China was the epicenter of the pandemic. The World Military Games took place from the 18th to the 27th October 2019 in Wuhan, China. Now, a lot of these people, these military athletes, were complaining in November and December of flu-like symptoms. We'll get into that in another video. That I'm going to make this a short video, but the other video is just going to go deep and wide in this rabbit hole. Okay, over 140 nations with 9,308 athletes participated, with over 300,000 attendees, volunteers, and staff. This study examined the hypothesis that the large gathering in a pandemic epicenter was a factor in the spread of COVID-19 disease. You think? So let's take a look at a sky view of where these people were housed. So I couldn't find the exact address of the Wuhan, China military athletes village, but I noticed it had two tracks, so it shouldn't be too hard to find on a map, and I found out the location was next to a lake. So let's zoom in on that on Google Maps. So we're over here on Google Maps, and you see these two stadiums, right, or track fields right here. So we're going to zoom in on that. Zoom in on it a little closer. This is the Wuhan village, okay? And then right up here, right next to where they're housed and all that, is a chicken farm. Here, so you see a chicken farm manufacturer. So that is quite a few thousand chickens, I imagine, in that area. And here's where they house all the athletes that competed in the World Military Games. And I found it strange that, and you know, right up here, of course, as we looked previously in the maps, right up here is the Virology Center. So let's come back down here to zoom in real quick again, and I want to go to something else that I found interesting about chickens. We found out months after the 2019 World Military Games, May 21st, 570 workers test positive for coronavirus at North Carolina poultry plant. Now, I'm not saying there's a connection. I'm just saying I found that interesting. But what really kind of has me upset is a long time ago, I had another channel, John919, and I had 27,000 subscribers, and I was talking about the natural immunity, the human immune system being a strong and powerful system built within us to combat this coronavirus. And those that had COVID-19 and got over it shouldn't be mandated to take the vaccine. Well, that, of course, got me kicked off of YouTube, got my channel deleted, and now we find out today this comes out. So let's read the header, the subheader, and the video title, and then we'll take a listen to some of the video. Immunity acquired from a COVID infection is as protective as vaccination against severe illness and death, study finds. The immunity, this is subheader, the immunity generated from an infection was found to be at least as high, if not higher, than that provided by 2 doses of an mRNA vaccine. New study finds immunity from COVID infection provides strong protection. Now let's take a listen to a little bit of this video. But first, let me make sure you see the date right here, February 16th. So I guess that was yesterday at 5:53 p.m.
In today's Daily Health, there's a new study that looks at our body's immunity after getting COVID.
Yeah, it finds the immunity that naturally builds up in our bodies after a COVID-19 infection is as protective as the 2 doses of the mRNA vaccines against severe illness and death. A fascinating study, and we have NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards with us to break all of it down. Erica, I remember earlier in the pandemic, shortly after vaccines became widely available, the CDC doing a study saying the amount of natural immunity people get varies sometimes from person to person. This study seems to be suggesting something a little bit different. So put this in simple terms for us. People who were infected, are they just as likely to be protected against COVID as those that were vaccinated, or is there a bit of variation?
Hey, good afternoon. It can be a little bit confusing. So let me be really clear. This study is not saying that you won't be reinfected if you already had the COVID-19 illness. What we're talking about is protection against severe illness if you are reinfected. So here's what the study is saying in really plain language. If you had COVID, you will be protected against becoming really sick or dying if you were to be reinfected, again, by 88%. That protection, according to the study, lasts for at least 10 months. That's really significant and really good news, considering that we've had almost 103 million cases of COVID-19 since the pandemic began in this country alone. And we're still logging an average of 35 to 40,000 cases every single day. Ellison, Joe.
Okay, so the study finds the risk of being in the hospital or the risk of death is lowered. But what about the symptoms that come from COVID?
It's a really great point, because while the immunity that comes from infection is robust and apparently long-lasting, getting COVID also carries the risk for severe complications, especially for our older adults. People with underlying conditions like diabetes, the virus itself can cause trouble breathing, extreme fatigue, not to mention long COVID, even ongoing heart problems. None of those outcomes have been associated with the vaccine. So that's why experts say it's really still the safest way to get immunity, to get those vaccines rather than becoming ill in the first place. Joe, Ellison.
So, Erica, there are people who are vaccinated, never got COVID, people who did not get vaccinated, got COVID, and then there are also people who maybe had both, vaccinated, but then also got COVID. Those people, that third group, were not included in this study. Why is that?
Yeah, that's because researchers really wanted to focus on natural immunity, what that meant for our overall immunity in the country. That's what makes science and studies like this so important. What I can tell you is that the natural immunity from infection, according to the study, was just as robust as the first 2 shots of COVID vaccines. Now, remember, the immune system needs time to develop its armor after it's exposed to the virus. And so at this point, there's no science to suggest that a combination of natural immunity from an infection plus what we get from vaccines would offer any significant additional protection. Ellison.
So I think the question a lot of folks are asking is, what does this mean for the boosters, especially those who've had COVID? I mean, let's be clear. We don't want people going around throwing those old school chickenpox parties, right?
No, that reminds me of my youth, and we cannot go back there. First, experts absolutely recommend against having parties to spread this or any other virus. Side effects from COVID infection are well known and potentially dangerous. When it comes to the boosters, based on this study, experts say it's reasonable to wait 6 even 8 months after a COVID infection to go in for a booster shot. Realistically, we're really looking at an annual COVID shot with the flu vaccine, guys.
And really quickly, Erica, what about the non-mRNA vaccines? Should people still be getting those?
Yeah, so honestly, there's really not much access anymore to those non-mRNA vaccines. The CDC says if you had one of those shots, you really should get the bivalent booster, which is only mRNA vaccines.
All right, some important information there. Erica Edwards, thanks for taking us deep into this study. We appreciate it.
This is one of the crazy things that happened. While I was putting this video together, finding the different things, because I'll have a whole bunch of tabs open, I was looking at the map while I was listening and doing a bunch of other stuff with a bunch of different tabs open. But I was listening to this 58-minute World Economic Forum, and they were talking about Davos 2019, and this was uploaded on February 10th, 2019, way before we got into all this corona problems. And they were talking about Disease X, confronting a new era of biological threats, okay? That was and it's amazing stuff they talk about at the World Economic Forum, and then a year later, the feces hits the fan. But now this year, the big thing is a major cyber attack shutting down electrical grids, and we're going to get to a video on that a little later on because it's kind of scary, especially with the China balloon and all this other crazy stuff that's going on in the world. But I'm going to try to mimic this. I'm going to try to go back here, and while I was looking around, I'm going to play a little bit of what he's saying while I'm looking at this. I didn't even notice the chicken farm until he said chicken eggs are one of the most utilized substances in making vaccines.
A lot of small companies can engage because it'd be a good name for them, but big companies, it takes away from them. And then the question is, who's going to pay for it if it's for very poor countries? And, we may, but are we set up to do that for many different organisms? So these are some of the questions that we need. The last point that's important, though, is how do we create platform technologies, kind of get them pre-approved so we can rapidly, when disease X appears, go ahead and do the biotechnological work to plug it into a platform technology that we know how to manufacture and work and be able to produce a vaccine quicker in the case of a severe outbreak. And these are some of the challenges we have. The last thing I'd say is that for flu, it's a big challenge. It's really slow. Most flu vaccines in the world today are still made on eggs. If you went back, you would be familiar with that. It's not very efficient. Obviously, you got to worry about bird flu, et cetera. And the challenge is, can we create, for example,